I mean, in terms of all this defence spending, you've been busy spending plenty of money already on the Challenger 3. I have to say, it's great that this seems to be moving forward. The live firing seems to be going well, so it's time to roll out. But there have been so many issues with the number of tanks that we have had over the last few years. This is a much-needed move.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Challenger 3 is a highly capable tank. It will be the most lethal and survivable tank we've ever had as a country. I was privileged to attend the live firing in Germany yesterday on the NATO qualified ranges. I think it's a really positive signal to the Army that we are backing them by investing in the most capable equipment that we have. And as you say, it comes at a time when we've announced we are going to 2.5% spending on defence. It's a really strong signal. It shows that this government is backing our armed forces to deliver a safer world.
There's much applause for more spending in defence. Many would agree that it's certainly needed. We're living in a much more dangerous world. But there is a lot of scrutiny as well for the Conservatives about how this uplift is going to be fully funded. I know we understand that there are going to be cuts to the civil service, but that's only going to partly pay for this, isn't it? Where is the rest of the money coming from?
Well, it's quite right that we do this in a prudent fashion. If you recall, our original pledge was to go to 2.5% when the economic circumstances allowed. So, yes, it is true, as you say, we will be reducing civil service numbers back to where they were before the pandemic. We think that's the right thing to do. But crucially, and I must stress this, we said we'd go to 2.5% when the economy allowed. The crucial factor here is that inflation has fallen sharply under our watch, from just under 11% to just over 3%. That's a very significant fall. And that means now, whereas when inflation was high, we had to do difficult things like not cutting taxes, not increasing spending. It's meant not only we can start bringing tax cuts forward, but we can commit to this hugely significant 2.5%, putting an extra £75 billion into the UK armed forces at, as you say, this time when it must be self-evident to everybody that the world is a less safe place.
How do we know how best to spend this money, though? In the sense, I mean, certainly in terms of procurement, you have to go through all these very complex processes, and there's 75 billion over 5 years is an awful lot of money, and yet there'll be more requests for that cash than actually money there is to spend.
Well, that's an excellent question, because absolutely, it's not just putting more money into our armed forces. I, as the Defence Procurement Minister, have a duty to ensure that that money is spent prudently and effectively. And the first thing I would say is, there's been huge support for the way that the UK has stood by Ukraine, providing huge numbers of munitions, Storm Shadow, tanks, and so on. But I think the public want to know that in doing that, we are replenishing our own stocks of munitions. That's why a top priority of this extra spending is £10 billion more for munitions. This will enable us to increase our stockpiles, but also to invest in the UK defence industry, which supports jobs and prosperity around the country.
I wanted to ask you about Con Coughlin's comment today in The Telegraph. He talks about the uplift to defence. He obviously applauds it, but he does say that there are troubling consequences. There isn't enough manpower in all three services. He details cuts to Royal Navy staffing means it's unable to crew both of its new Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers, whilst cuts to the Royal Air Force suffering from a shortage of trained pilots. I mean, that's a great concern, isn't it? I mean, we could be on a war footing in terms of funding, but we don't actually have the ability to conduct proper war fighting, do we?
Well, I'm pleased to say in January, we actually had the largest number of applications to join the Army for 6 years. So actually, we do have a huge amount of interest because of the mission and what's happening in the world. Lots more people wanting to join the armed forces. But look, we've been very open. The Secretary of State has said in the House of Commons, when you have very low unemployment like we do, there are pressures on the labour market. There are issues around retention. We've been very clear about that. So first of all, we've brought out what's called the Haythorne Review, which is to look at how we can make careers in the armed forces suit, should we say, modern expectations around how the workplace is and the sort of, should we say, whether that's lifestyle choices, etc., working with people as they would expect to have employment in the modern day. We want to do more of that. But secondly, and I think really importantly, for people out there thinking of joining the armed forces or those who already serve, they want to see a government that's got their back. And the way you do that is by backing our armed forces with more spending. and, as you said, with effective procurement. And I've had the pleasure to set out a radical new reform of our procurement system. It's called the integrated procurement model. It will get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy and I do believe will lead to better procurement. But of course, to do that, you also need the funding. So we've got the 2.5%. So I think it's a really big positive week for the British Armed Forces. And I think that is the single most important thing, sending that positive message to those who serve on the front line.
OK, Minister, good to talk to you. You'll be pleased to know that one of our GB News members has got in touch who goes by the name Ex-Tanky Commander. So he presumably knows what he's on about. And he says, what a beautiful tank. Love it. So there you go.
Well, the live firing was very successful. I'm pleased to say it is an excellent tank and we look forward to it serving for many years on the front line with the British Army.
OK, Minister, thanks very much indeed.